thank you everyone for being here. I'm Chris Poulos. I'm Executive Director for the Center for Justice and Human Dignity. Hope everyone enjoyed day one and that day two is off to a great start. We had over 500 registrants, including I believe over 100, possibly even over 200 active judges, prosecutors, pretrial folks, probation officers from all over the country, as well as advocates, family members, formerly incarcerated folks. I'm considering this a resounding success, especially for the Center for Justice and Human Dignity's first event. So thank you. First major event, at least. Enough from me. Welcome, everyone. Great to see you all. This is the panel on clemency, mercy, and other back-end release strategies. Thank you all for being here. Our moderator this morning is Jolene Forman. Jolene is the Chief Program Officer at the Just Trust. She's spent over 2 decades working on criminal justice reform, and she has led legal and legislative advocacy, reentry, and in-prison programming, as well as philanthropic initiatives. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Jolene. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, all. Thank you for joining us today. As Chris just said, I'm Jolene Forman. Is this mic going in? Let me move this closer. I'm Jolene Forman, the Chief Program Officer at the Just Trust. We're an organization that's 100% dedicated to aligning, scaling, and deploying resources to the criminal justice reform advocacy ecosystem. The Just Trust aims to accelerate reform in every corner of the country using a variety of strategies, including grant making, narrative change, messaging and polling, and aligning, creating creative alliances across the political spectrum, and much more, all with the end goal of lasting community safety and well-being for all. Through an initial 5-year investment of $350 million, our team is working hard to power reform efforts that will help write the next chapter of the criminal justice system in America, one that works harder to keep people out than in, that actually creates safety and prevents harm instead of just reacting after something bad happens. And importantly, one that centers true accountability and prioritizes the things people actually need to heal and restore communities and to stop the cycle of harm. We now have over 50 years of data about what works and what doesn't when it comes to how we deliver justice in this country. It's time to pay attention to it. We simply can't keep doing what we've always done and expect different results. I'm honored to be here today with these esteemed panelists who are helping create that world we want to see. The Honorable Robert Ehrlich Jr. is Senior Counsel in the Government Advocacy Practice at King and Spalding. He's also the former governor and congressman from Maryland. Jason Hernandez is a board member for the Sentencing Project, the founder of Get Clemency Now and La Tiendita, and a clemency recipient. David Ogden is a partner and the chair of the Government and Regulatory Litigation Practice at WilmerHale and the former U.S. Deputy Attorney General. Elizabeth Oyer is the pardon attorney for the U.S. Department of Justice, and Cynthia Roseberry is the director of the Civil Rights Division at the American Civil Liberties Union. She also co-convenes the Justice Roundtable and co-chairs the Criminal Justice Working Group at the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. In our limited time together, I won't be able to do our panelists justice by naming their many accomplishments, so I encourage you to review their full bios in the Summit's WOVA app, or you can also find them by entering the website address or scanning the QR code on page 16 of your programs. Before I turn it to our panelists, I'd like to frame the discussion a bit. We're in a challenging moment for criminal justice reform. There have been upticks in certain violent offenses that have led to concerns about public safety and a return to law and order rhetoric. This has not just been in the public discourse, this has also been weaponized by politicians on the right and on the left. In many cases, criminal justice reform is an easy scapegoat, often simply because it's perceived as a challenge to the only thing we know that theoretically keeps us safe. Regardless of all the spin, there are many sound back-end policies that help release people from prison without compromising on public safety. These include, but are not limited to, clemency, second look, and non-custodial sentencing policies. For example, we're 3 years into the CARES Act, which expanded the amount of time people could be placed on home confinement rather than being imprisoned. Through the CARES Act, over 13,000 people were placed in home confinement to serve at the end of their sentences, and only 0.17% of them committed new offenses. This policy successfully demonstrated that there are more cost-effective and humane approaches to helping people reintegrate into society that also keep communities safe. Throughout this discussion, I welcome the panelists and audience to think about what it really means to balance accountability with compassion when we consider people serving long sentences. How do we want to treat a person who does the hard work of seeking redemption and is granted forgiveness through a commuted sentence, a pardon, early release, or a non-custodial sentence? Since our time together is brief, I'll try my best to move the discussion along, but we will reserve time for questions and answers at the end of the panel discussion, and then we'll wrap it up with some closing thoughts from each of the panelists. Let's get started. So Jason, starting with you, you were sentenced to life without parole plus 320 years for a nonviolent drug offense when you were only 21 years old. After nearly 18 years in prison, you became one of the first people to receive clemency under the Obama administration. How did you feel when you were granted clemency, and what was the whole clemency petition experience like for you?
Hello, everyone. Before I answer that question, I want to just bring something up real quick that just being here yesterday and today and listening to all the prosecutors and judges, people from the Sentencing Commission, the Bureau of Prisons talk about sentencing reform, it's unbelievable, to tell you the truth. I was what you would call a jailhouse attorney when I was incarcerated, and I would do petitions all the time, direct appeals, writs to the Supreme Court, 3582C2s, 2255s, and spend months on them. And I'd file it on a Monday, and then Friday I'd get denied, one-liner. But then I would read opinions from Judge Bennett, who I met yesterday. I don't know if he's here, Gleason, and some of the other judges. And it would give me, they'd write these lengthy opinions about why the guidelines were wrong, why the crack disparity was wrong. And I'd write their opinions down, and I remember I would take them to my cell, and I would read them, like at night. And it gave me hope to, when there was no hope. And just to see those people now, it's when I was incarcerated, but then now to see them in person, it's a surreal feeling, and I just can't thank y'all enough for, your job is sending people to, that's not your job to send people to prison every day, but that's what's happening. But to be in this arena right now and to see that that there's reform taking place, I just wish everybody in prison could see it, because they're not aware of what's going on right now, and just thank y'all so much. For me, I received my clemency almost 10 years to the day. It was December 19th, 2013, and it kind of starts off like a fairy tale to an extent. It was December 19th. It was a cold, brisk, windy afternoon, and I was coming out of the chow hall, out of the mess where we eat at. I had just finished, and I came out. I was at El Reno FCI prison in Oklahoma, and on the intercom, they said, "Jason Hernandez, report to the captain's complex." And when they said that, I got cold chills. And I just stopped dead in my tracks, because the last time that they had called me to the captain's complex was in 2002. And that was to tell me that my brother had been murdered. And so when they told me to go to the captain's complex, I didn't go. I was scared. I had filed my clemency petition in 2011, almost 27 months to that day. But it didn't cross my mind about receiving clemency. And I went to my cell, but before I could get there, my case manager stopped me at the door, and he was like, "Get in here right now." And he locked the door, and he was like, "What have you done did?" I was like, "I haven't done nothing." "What gang are you in?" I'm like, "Man, I'm not in no gang." He goes, "You did something because they told me to lock you in here until we get you an escort across the yard." So they take me to the captain's complex, and they put me in this room. There's this big fluffy couch. I don't know if it was fluffy. It was fluffy to me. Because I haven't sat in one in, almost 15 years. And then the carpet, there was like fluffy carpet, which it probably wasn't fluffy if it was even if it was in a prison. But I'm sitting there, and then the captain walks in, and these individuals know me, but they don't, they don't really know me. And he comes in, and he's like, "Jason Hernandez, 07031, 078. I'm like, "Yes, sir." "What have you done did?" I'm like, I haven't done nothing." "What gang are you in?" I'm like, "I'm not in a gang." And he goes, "Oh, yeah, you did something, or they wouldn't be calling me down here." And then a lieutenant comes in, same thing. "What gang are you in?" It's just the same back and forth thing. And I'm like, "Well, what's going on? Like, you tell me what's going on. Like, I don't know. Like, y'all called me, like, what is my family?" Because right now I'm thinking, is my life in danger? Is my mother alive? Is my father alive? Has somebody passed away in my family? And my heart's racing. I'm scared. So I'm just sitting there, and then they kind of got me surrounded to an extent because they don't really know what's going on, and I can just feel like they're tensed and they're just waiting for somebody to come in to say, like hog tie 'em, like get them and slam them on the ground, hog tie me and take me to the hole. But I'm just worried about my family at the end, because I know I hadn't done nothing. And I'm just worried about my family, and I want to call them, and they won't let me use the phone. And then the warden walks in. The warden at a prison is like almost like the president almost. I mean, he runs that place. So he comes in, he greets everybody, and he sits down. No, he's standing up, and he has his paper in his hand. And he goes, "How are you doing?" And I'm like, "Not good." And he goes, "Are you Jason Hernandez, inmate number 07031, 078? I say, "Yes, sir, I am." And he goes, "Well, I have a clemency order from President Barack Obama, commuting your life sentence plus 320 years down to 20 years. You're no longer going to die in prison." And, when they tell you, when people would always ask me, "Jason, what are you going to do when they tell you can go home?" And you have this thought in your brain where, and I would tell them, "You don't have to worry, what I'm going to do, because you're going to know. I'm going to be doing backflips. I'm going to be running. I'm going to be breakdancing. Like, yeah, you'll know if I get my sentence reduced." And it was really like none of that. And I didn't know how to react at first. So I looked at him, and I said, and please excuse my language, but I got to say it how it happened. And I'm sitting down in this fluffy couch, and I'm like, and I tell him, "You're bullshitting me, right?" And then he has this executive order. He turns it around, and he goes, "No, I have the executive order right here." And I see President Obama's signature and this gold seal, right? And, it was like this bittersweet moment. And I remember just kind of I remember getting in this fetal position, and I was crying like I am now. And I said, "It's over. It's over." And it was just like, men don't cry, and you definitely don't cry in prison. And I didn't even get to cry when my brother was murdered. And it was just like this release of emotions. And I knew that, and why I was hurting so much, I mean, it was like one of the best moments of my life. But the reason I was hurting so much was because even though I was going to go home, my brother, who was murdered in prison, wasn't going to go home. He was never going to walk through those doors. And then I had to go back to my cell, to my pod, and I had to go talk to these individuals who were serving life without parole, who had done 20 years, who were more deserving than me. And people used to laugh at me and think that I was crazy because I was doing a petition to the president, that I was writing a letter to the president asking him to release me. But I had to walk back, which I wanted to do. And it's probably a scene that you will never see in prison, where when I got up, my counselor, my case manager are there, the warden and everybody, and they're all shaking my hand. You never see a guard shake a prisoner's hand, patting me on my back. And my case manager, who had known me for about 3 years at that time, told me, the president couldn't have picked a better person. And then my case manager said, what do we do next? What happens now? And I was like, what are you talking about? He was like, you can't go back to the compound. Like, they'll do something to you. I was like, nah, they're not. Like, no, I want to go see my people. Like, they need to know what happened. Like, they need to see that what I got, that they can get it as well. Like, I want to go back to the yard. Because there's just this notion that when people are going home, they think that prisoners are against that, and that's totally false. I mean, the stereotype, a lot of the stereotypes about people that are incarcerated is false. Some of the most amazing people I ever met were incarcerated. And you know what, President Obama, he actually visited the prison that I was at almost about a year later. And when he said, had he been born in the same environment that these individuals were born in, that he more likely would have been incarcerated as well. And I would like to tell the president that if these individuals would have been born in your environment, they could have been president as well. But so after that, I walked back to my pod, and I don't know how to talk. I'm very I can't speak, and it's about count time, so people are coming in, and I tell one person, and then he starts telling everybody, hey, Jason's going home, and then everybody just starts surrounding me, and everybody wants to see the petition, and and I'm letting them take it, like here, take it, like just look at it, and hey, can you do my clemency petition? I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. Like, they don't think I'm crazy no more. And then one of my buddies, Kenneth Evans, who had life without parole, had been incarcerated 20 years at that time, was actually my neighbor. He lived in the cell next to me. Real good guy, amazing individual. Helped me get my GED, helped me to learn how to weld, get my welding certification. And we were in the cell, and I just told him, man, I'm sorry, man, because I had told all of them I was going to help get all of them out. And at that time, which I didn't know, that President Obama had granted 7 other individuals clemency that day. 7 of them were African American, 1 Latino, 6 were serving life without parole, 2 were serving 30 years, which I didn't know at that time. And so when I'm talking to him in his cell, he told me the same thing too, that the president couldn't have selected a better person. And he knew that I was going to come out and continue to fight for them. So after that, I go to the payphone, and at that time I didn't know either. Like, it's all on the news, because Obama had not granted clemency. No, I'm lying. He granted clemency to one individual, African American lady, in 2011. But prior to that, he had never granted clemency to anyone. Commutation. He had did a couple of pardons. So I don't know what's going on. But then I go to the phone, and it's like national headline news. And so when my mom answers, like, she's crying. She's crying too, and she says, "Is it true, mijo? Is it true, mijo?" And she's just crying, and I say, "Mama." You ain't got to cry no more. Your baby boy's coming home. And, you know, it was just, because, you know, at that time, that was the thing, too. And I didn't know that when I was selling drugs when I went to prison, that, you know, my mother and father were doing the time with me. When I went to prison, my older two brothers went to prison as well. And I didn't realize that. And that was that bittersweet moment when I got my life back. And I remember having that clemency petition, like I kept it in my hand for like 2 days. I didn't want to let go of it. I even went to sleep with it because I thought that if I didn't keep it in my hand, that it wouldn't be real. And, you know, I would just walk the yard and I would just show everybody, like, look what I got, like, look, and everybody was so happy. I mean, if you look at my petition right now, it got coffee stains on it, it got cheese, it got grease, it got tears on it. But, I mean, you know, just at the end of the day, to have that, to be back here right now, and again, to see some of these judges, to see what's going on right now. And, man, I just can't, it still feels like a fantasy to me. It doesn't seem real to be sitting next to the pardon attorney right here, right? And yeah, but I mean, I just, you know, I can't thank the president enough for giving me my second chance. And you know, the clemency process for me was extremely hard because I say I was doing clemency when clemency wasn't cool. Like there was no Kim Kardashian or anybody like that so associated with clemency, and they were definitely not giving it to people. So clemency is extremely hard to get. If you're serving a life sentence, only one person had ever received clemency, serving a life sentence, but your chances go down extremely low. If you're a minority, your chances go down extremely low. If it was a drug offense, your chances go down extremely, extremely low. So I had all of those going against me, but President Obama flipped that on its head. During his presidency, over 1,700 people received clemency. I think all of them were drug offenders. 90% were minorities, and over 500 of them were serving life without parole. Many people that I know and that I look like to as brothers, and I've associated with since they came out. But no, it's just a blessing to be here. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your powerful story with us. Governor Ehrlich, shifting gears a little bit, as governor, you work to make executive clemency fairer, more common, and more transparent. As a Republican, why was it important for you to lead this effort, and how did your Democratic colleagues react?
Well, you know, in politics, you don't want to follow a compelling speaker. So, Jason, thanks for screwing that up for me. So you're the context of why I'm here. You're the context of why we're all here. So the short answer is it's an imperfect system. And especially with regard to executive power, you're the last stop. And if you believe in the definition of why you run for public office, especially why you run for a chief executive position, justice is a part of it. And state constitutions give some governors the ability to exercise this extraordinary power. And quite frankly, as horrendous as your case was, it was a nonviolent offense. And we really pushed it in Maryland because we entertained petitions with regard to lifer cases, murder cases. And they're tough. And so the next time a politician tells you that they don't want to be reelected, they're lying. And this is a political process, and even this extraordinary power is exercised in the context of political power. And politicians have to answer, obviously, to the public. So I don't want to take any great credit, but we were doing this when it wasn't cool to be doing this. We were doing this before it was a fad. And to answer your question, I do think it's probably easier for Republicans to do it rather than Democrats, right versus left, because center right or right Republicans have more credibility with potentially very upset constituencies. It's much more difficult for someone from the left to do it, and that's just the political answer, but I think it's an accurate answer as well. So, again, Jason, you're the context of why this power exists. It's a difficult power to exercise because the fact of it is, part of that definition of your job description is justice, but obviously the bottom line is public safety as well, and balancing that is not easy. And that's why we took it so seriously, and that's why most governors are fearful of it. When we came to power in 2003, it was still the Willie Horton era. And a lot of executives were shying away from this power, and still do. And I get it. Believe me, I get it. Because recidivism is the ultimate bad story for a politician, and the ultimate bad story you have to explain during the course of a political race for re-election. So I don't want to say we were great, but we were certainly out there, and I do believe, with respect to my record in state legislature and in Congress and my sort of philosophical orientation with regard to criminal justice and crime issues generally, it was easier for me to do this despite the fact that there's no credit. There's no political credit. And my staff would come to me every day and say, why are we doing this? Where's the constituency? Where's the great article in the Washington Post? Where's the compelling notion as to why we're going through all this? Because my friends in the legislature who are Democrats would come up to me silently and say, Bobby, I'm really glad you're doing this, but I can't really say it out loud because you're a Republican and we're going to try to beat your brains out next election. But really, keep it up. It's great. Congratulations. And that's just the political consequence of it as well. So it's not easy to do, but executives should do it. And I think that until recently, it was the cool thing to do. It's the great purple issue of our time. But you also have to be very careful with regard to your definitions of what it means, because when you talk about criminal justice reform, it's a very subjective notion. So in order to engage in it, first explain it. And my last observation would be, if you're going to do this, especially in this environment today, you need buy-in from all interested parties, including the victim community. And before I began this process, I went to the victim community and said, I want to do this. It's serious. We're just not going to look at pardons from DUIs from 20 years ago and somebody needs a job at the FBI. We're going to look at lifer cases, we're going to look at more violent cases, we're going to look at serious cases, because that's part of my job description. And I got that buy-in, and to the extent you can get that buy-in, it makes the political terrain much easier.
Thank you, Governor. Sticking with you for a little bit longer, you started to answer this with the buy-in from survivors, but how can we break the political molds that are beginning to define this issue? You're either soft on crime or tough on crime, and how do we get to the place where we can push forward known solutions that lie in between?
Executives have to use the bully pulpit to educate the public. It's not just educate the public, it's to be upfront with the public. The system's not perfect. Look at that guy sitting right there. Nobody said the system's perfect. The law gives executives this particular power to make more equal justice, which is why you should be in this business in the first place. But it's not easy. You're all familiar with the pitfalls and all that, but even the press makes it not easy, because my press folks would always angst over the fact that we're giving some pardon to somebody in maybe a difficult case, and maybe that person's third cousin had a cocktail party for me 15 years ago. I wrote a $25 check, and it's going to be all over the Washington Post that this person bought influence because they wrote a check or came to a rally or whatever, because there's, again, political downsides to it. And often the press isn't even with it, because they're always looking for politicians with nefarious bottom lines. But the answer to your question, it's about public education. It's about being upfront, using the bully pulpit. When you're running, when you're governor, president of the United States, this is what we're going to do. I can do it. It's a balanced approach. We're going to get buy-in, and it's all about justice. And if you do it any other way, you're asking for problems, and I'll just conclude with this. I never understood why executives wait till Christmas. What, justice only occurs at Christmas? I mean, I don't understand why pardons always come out only at Christmas. We tried to make it regular order, regular process, monthly, so that nobody was surprised. And that would also disarm the media as well.
Thank you. Liz, as pardon attorney, you review applications for commutations and pardons all year long, not just at Christmas. Can you help demystify this process and how it works in practice?
Sure, yeah. Can everyone hear me? So we have a lot of folks who are interested in clemency. We have a lot of clemency cases. I'm sure that you've all heard a lot of talk about the clemency backlog. When I first was appointed as pardon attorney, I was asked, what are you gonna do to fix the clemency backlog? And it's true that there are a lot of clemency applications pending, but I've never thought of it as a backlog. It's a large group of people, individuals whose families and communities have hopes that are resting on the clemency process working for them. And there are real live individuals like Jason standing behind every one of these petitions in our queue. So the approach of the Office of the Pardon Attorney is one that takes really seriously the fact that these are individuals who may have no other recourse available to them to get relief from a very lengthy sentence, whose hopes are resting on the work that my office does. And we have an outstanding, incredible team of people who are doing that work. We have a group of really committed people who take incredibly seriously their review of every single application that comes into our office and every single application that comes across their desks. I get calls on a daily basis from members of my team, many of whom are here today, saying, Liz, I'm really struggling with this. Liz, what do you think I can do about this bad fact in the context of a bunch of other really good facts? People take this analysis really seriously, and people want to get results. People want to get answers to all of those folks who are waiting for an answer on their clemency petition, because we want to see more people like Jason out in the community doing the things that they can do to live up to their potential. Jason is just the best example of why clemency is so important. Nobody could look at Jason and possibly think that President Obama made the wrong decision when he signed that clemency warrant. And there are other people like Jason who benefited from President Obama's clemency initiative. And there are other people like Jason who are still incarcerated, who didn't get clemency under President Obama, but who have a lot of potential that is frankly being wasted in prison. There are people who deserve a second chance, and everyone is deserving of a second chance. It's not just people like Jason who committed nonviolent drug offenses, it's everyone. You'll hear people who have been incarcerated for lengthy periods of time talk quite sincerely about how they no longer recognize the person who committed that offense 25 or 30 years ago. They remember them as a prior individual, somebody that they knew at a time in the past, but that's not who they are anymore. People can change. People are capable of rehabilitation and transformation. And those folks who've managed to undergo that process themselves really can add a lot of value to our communities, and a lot of potential is being wasted continuing the incarceration of those folks and for the rest of their lives. So there's a lot of need for clemency. The governor is absolutely right that there's a political aspect to it, which can make some of these cases challenging to get through the clemency process. And also, the president, who controls the clemency decision-making function at the federal level, he's quite a busy person with a lot of things on his desk. So we do need other available options. We need alternatives to clemency as a way to expand the opportunities for this type of relief from lengthy sentences. But right now, clemency is what we've got, and it's really incredibly important, and it's really something that I just want to assure folks who wonder what's actually going on in the Office of the Pardon Attorney and in the Department of Justice, that we are working really hard to create more stories like Jason's, to play our part in creating more stories like that. And I want to just acknowledge that there are some fantastic colleagues of mine who are here today. I don't want to embarrass anyone, but I see two of them right there and another one over there. And I just wanted to ask if the attorneys from the Office of the Pardon Attorney would stand up for a second. These are the folks that you can hit up at the break with your questions about what's really going on behind the scenes. They're the folks who are reviewing your applications. They're really wonderful, committed people from all different backgrounds. I know that, sometimes folks are skeptical of the positioning of the clemency function in the Department of Justice. We've got people who have been prosecutors. We've got a lot of people who are former public defenders. We've got people who've never practiced criminal law before except in this role. It's a really diverse group of people, but the thing they have in common is that they believe in redemption, they believe in second chances, and they are very committed to the work that they're doing.
Thank you, Liz. In hearing you reflect on your role, it's clear that you see people as more than just their criminal record. How do you bring the whole person into the review process?
So, to some extent, we're a little bit limited by the materials that are submitted in the clemency package. And one thing that we've really tried to do over the last couple of years is get better about educating the public on what we really need to see in a clemency application to put your best foot forward, give yourself the best possible chance of being considered favorably for commutation of sentence or for a pardon. We're actually doing these educational sessions within the Bureau of Prisons now, so we're going around to different facilities, sort of trying to figure out where we're getting the most clemency applications from and giving people information about what types of materials are helpful to submit. We're encouraging people who've been waiting for a long time to submit a supplement telling us what has changed, what's new, what accomplishments have they had recently. And we're doing the same in public-facing settings for families and advocates of people who are seeking clemency. So what we get in the application is really important. We also have access to some other court records and materials like that. But the essential thing is for people to have the experience, for people who work in my office to have the experience to interact with the types of individuals who are seeking clemency and to be able to envision that full person, even if you don't actually get to meet the person as you would if you're, representing them as a client. And so we've got a lot of people who have backgrounds where they've worked with clients, represented clients, and that comes naturally. And then we've got other folks who haven't had that experience. And so we've done a lot of community outreach, engagement, speakers, presentations, visits to the Bureau of Prisons to try to ensure that everybody who works in the Office of the Pardon Attorney really understands and visualizes the individuals who are seeking clemency and whose hopes are resting on the clemency process beyond just the pieces of paper that are in front of us.
Thank you. Turning to David, as I understand it, there wasn't much of a clemency process when you served as DAG. I'm going to kind of ask a multi-pronged question for you. Why is having a pardon attorney and clemency process so important? And can you also share a bit about your experience representing Norman Brown in his clemency petition?
Sure. Hello, everybody, and appreciate your having me today. Yeah, we had a process when I was the Deputy Attorney General. Well, it just wasn't a very good one. It wasn't one, really the Pardon Attorney's Office had become, I think, kind of a stale backwater in the department, which was a sad thing. I think it was a product to some extent of the fact that the tool had not been used for decades, really, in a significant way or in a way that had been the way it ought to work, the way that Governor Ehrlich described in, undertaking in Maryland. It was a process that had a bunch of mistakes made in connection with it, political uses of the tool that had been, had caused sort of dishonor, and it just, and it had been largely ignored. For decades, this wasn't just a creature of the Bush administration or the Clinton administration. It went way back. And so, when I came in as deputy, it was something I was interested in because it is, as the authority to commute a sentence or to pardon, an offender is an extraordinary power. It's a power the president has that Congress doesn't get to mess with. I mean, it's an actual thing the president can do. And it seemed to me very important that we have a process that worked. But as has been alluded to, you know, President has a lot of things to worry about. President Obama had a lot of things to worry about in 2009. And so it was a challenge, sort of getting a policy in place, getting a focus on this, and eventually, Jason, it came, you know, in time. But there weren't the resources in the office. It wasn't staffed adequately. Things moved very slowly. The leadership in the office, you know, I don't think there was enthusiasm about the tool. I don't think there was a sense that second chances were important. It was a sense that we kind of were moving paper, and that people were, you know, that this was a paper process. So you know, it wasn't in good shape. And when I see what was happened here with Liz Oyer in the role, and I think, you know, obviously in the Obama time, the second term of the Obama administration, I mean, a lot of energy came into this process, which was very exciting to see. Great things happened. Jason is evidence of that. My client Norman Brown is evidence of that. And now, you know, with energy, with a vision, with a belief in the importance of second chances in that office, with adequate resources, I just think it's a game changer. It's just a different world. Now the issue becomes the political part that the governor was talking about. I mean, we have a process that right up to that point I think is working, and the challenge becomes, you know, getting that last step. But it's absolutely essential. The process has to have integrity. It has to have adequate resources so that good recommendations are coming up that can be relied upon, that, you know, we're minimizing the risk that there is recidivism, because that can set the whole process back, as we know. And so the process has to have that kind of integrity, that kind of reality to it, trying to find the right folks for this tool to be used. And I think recognizing what I came to see in a very personal sense with the representation that I had, the opportunity I had to represent Norman Brown, you know, that there are such injustices in the system, you know, structural injustices with mandatory minimums that I'm sure, Jason, you dealt with, and individual injustices where, I mean, the sentencing judge in Norman's case, in sentencing him, said this is grossly disproportionate, but I have no choice. Well, the only way you can correct that is through this tool in this day and age. So you know, that was an exceptional experience. And I guess the one other thing I would say, coming out of the experience of representing Norman, number one, there are extraordinary people behind bars and whose lives are being wasted. I mean, in the way that Jason has done remarkable things, Norman has come out and just done great things, helping folks who are returning to the community, helping young people who are at risk in D.C. in the D.C. System. You know, he runs a weekly book club with literally hundreds of former offenders who read books and have these conversations, and who Norman is kind of the catalyst for. So he's an extraordinary guy. You know, he's only out because the system, in his case, finally came around and worked, and he's only in a position to do that for that reason. So that obviously comes home very hard to me. And the second thing is, I think educating the folks who are in prison about how the system works is fantastic. I wish we had more attorneys who were in a position to help put these applications together. I don't think it's essential, but I think it's an enormously helpful, and I think it would be great if we had a process that connected people who are plausible candidates for clemency with lawyers who are interested in providing pro bono services, because I think that would be helpful. Anyway, those are some thoughts.
Thank you. Cynthia, turning to you, you are manager of the Clemency Project 2014, the largest national pro bono effort to provide assistance to clemency application during the Obama Clemency Initiative. Why do you think we need additional back-end strategies beyond clemency, such as second look?
Thanks for that question, Jolene. Thanks for your partnership, and thank you for being here today. My employer requires me to let you know that these thoughts are my own. So I will let you know that up front. I think we've discussed a little bit how with the Christmas surprise and the infrequent use of clemency, why we need something beyond clemency. In many states where the bulk of people who are imprisoned are being held, there are no opportunities for clemency, either because of a lack of political will or structure. And so legislation is important in addition to executive effort. We've seen an increase in sort of these second look kinds of laws. In 2020, I think we saw 3 enacted. In 2023, there were at least 88 bills enacted that provide sort of a second look provision, either through like getting rid of life without the possibility of parole, or through some sort of compassionate release component. To a lesser degree, there have been some caps on sentences so that they aren't so long. And then in these processes, some of them are automatic. So there's an automatic review after a certain term that can happen. And in some, they are triggered by a petition of some sort. But they all reflect, this idea that we believe that everyone deserves a second chance. And so there has to be some mechanism other than the one elected official who, with the stroke of a pen, can grant someone liberty. It has to be the will, of the people. We see, Jason is such a stellar example, that there is a need for second chances, and to limit it to this bottleneck of clemency, really truncates our ability to extend liberty to people. I have to talk about this unbroken line, though, between chattel slavery in our country and our current prison system, with the exception clause of the 13th Amendment, and which has created and continued the system of mass incarceration, right? And particularly overrepresentation of African Americans in the carceral system. And so we need a mass effort, just like we've had for so long, to put people in, to bring folks out. There has to be just as much muscle into liberating people as there has been into imprisoning people, right? And we have to be willing to commit the kinds of resources that are needed to both let people come home and to have them come home and land safely as well. When we talk about the communities from which most people are plucked and incarcerated, they are communities that are severely under-resourced. I heard somebody recently say, we take people, we put them in prison, we take everything from them, then we send them home with nothing and expect them to succeed, right? And that just doesn't make sense. During Clemency Project 2014, one of the criterion was that you had to have served 10 years in prison. And when I looked at that arc, I realized that most of the people, the 36,000 applicants that we were reviewing, went to prison before the iPod, before the BlackBerry, before a lot of modern technology. And so bringing them home was really like putting an alien on a different planet, right? One person said, someone said, I'll call you on my BlackBerry, and he thought the person was insane, right? And I remember one woman saying she didn't know how to wash her hands when she came home because she went to a public restroom and kept looking for the knobs to turn. She felt humiliated in that moment, right? Because she didn't know about the automatic system. So we should be as prepared to provide a soft landing, resources, and a soft landing for people when they come home. We need a mechanism to bring them home. And I'll say one more thing about that because of this whole idea of Willie Horton, right? If it's true that we aren't providing the resources, and on the Colson Task Force, we found that that transfer from prison through the probation office, and I know we have some probation folks here, was disjointed, so that the mere files weren't handed over to the halfway houses, so there was no continuity in whatever the services are. You know, we bring people home and we talk about recidivism as if it's a failure on the person, but that system has failed that person. So I think when we shift that narrative, we'll have more political space to bring people home.
Thank you, Cynthia. Before we turn to audience Q&A, I'd like to ask one question of all of the panelists based on a theme that I'm hearing. I'm hearing all the panelists talk about the importance of second chances or redemption. So, you know, if we believe in second chances, clemency and other second look opportunities should be a regular and routine act in states and at the federal level. Why are second chances so important in our justice system? Second chances, including that soft landing that Cynthia just described. And how can we continue to advance these back-end release strategies in the face of the headwinds to social reforms that we've been facing over the past couple years? Cynthia, this time I'm going to start with you. And again, try to keep the responses brief so we can move to Q&A.
Good luck with that. So I will admit that I learned more history since Hamilton was produced than I did in school, right? And in Federalist 74, he talked about the benign prerogative of pardoning should be as little as possible fettered or embarrassed, right? And he said that what it was a power that was granted to avoid severity and unfortunate guilt. We have to understand that our system is flawed. And so if it is flawed, there is an opportunity for correction, right? We have the redemption campaign at the ACLU, where we say we need to reflect an evolution in our thinking about the criminal legal system. If we believe you should no longer serve 10 years for a crime, then folks who are in there serving 10 years for a crime need to come home too. It needs to be retroactive, right? And I believe that what we do when we redeem the system is we redeem America and its ills too from having incarcerated so many people.
Thank you, Cynthia. Governor?
We need to define our terms and just get some of the easy stuff done. The pardon office having the resources and the attorneys available and getting its act straight and trying to depoliticize itself shouldn't be that hard, and we've done it. And as a result, it's more efficient and has more credibility. Congratulations. And that's important. That's not that hard. Aftercare, halfway, getting the file straight, not that hard. This is not heavy lifting. Some of it's heavy lifting. Marijuana possession, extraordinary length, not that hard, shouldn't be. Fentanyl distribution, yeah, I got less sympathy for that. We have to define our terms, what we're talking about here. So, again, it's up to leaders and candidates in the political process to speak real and have a constituency demand politicians speak real and act real and not just talking cliches and all the easy stuff. Define your terms, stand what you stand for, and defend it. And that's not easy in a political process when you're trying to get votes. So criminal justice reform, as I said, until very recently was the great purple issue. Everybody was getting on board, and how cool is this, and we can talk, and President Trump, President Obama, the whole 9 yards. And because in my view, some of the lines have been stepped over. Now it's much more difficult, and it's going to be much more difficult as a result for politicians to act in non-political ways.
Thank you, Governor. Jason?
So I actually have a pardon petition pending right now.
Please don't talk to me about that.
So, when we talk about redemption, for myself, when I wrote a letter to the president back in 2011, and I told him that I was sorry for what I did, and I wanted to come back to my community and make up for all the wrong that I had done, and that there were people who could probably argue that I should not be in prison, and there were people who could argue that I should stay in prison for the rest of my life. And what I told him was that I can't tell you how much time I deserve. What I can tell you, though, is that I'm not that kid who sold drugs 15, 20 years ago, that I'm a changed man, and that I want to come back to my community, and I want to make up for all the wrong that I did. And when I was released in 2015, after serving 17 years and 10 months in prison, I have been on this mission to rectify, redeem what I had done. I was selling drugs. I was a drug dealer. I was poisoning my community. And I'll continue to do that. And when I was putting my pardon petition together, I wanted to get people to support me. And my first thought was to get individuals who know some of the work I've been doing on a national level. I was going to reach out to Cynthia, Roseberry, Mark Osler, who helped me with my pardon petition, and other esteemed individuals like that. Because I wanted to show the president and the pardon attorney that, look what I've been doing since I've been out. But to me, when I thought about it, I was like, I want the people from my community I want to see what they say. I want to see if they'll support this place that I lived in, that I did so much wrong in. And I was getting these signatures, and even got signatures from some people whose family members were addicted to the drugs that I sold, or people sold for me, and they forgave me. And at the end of the day, I said, you know what? It's not about a pardon or the president forgave me. It was about my community forgiving me and accepting me back, and they have. And to touch on what Cynthia had said, like this redemption, it's double-edged, right? I'm trying to make up for all the wrong that I did. But you have people who are in office now who are the architects of this mass incarceration. And this is an opportunity for them to make right what they have done wrong. Because it is not by accident that you have over 2 million people incarcerated and 2/3 of them are minorities. That was a policy decision. And it was the pen that got us into mass incarceration, and it's the pen that can get us out of it. So we should use mass clemency to end mass incarceration.
Liz, over to you.
Thanks. So it's always been obvious to me, I think because of my background as a federal public defender, why second chances are important. And I think that probably anybody who's worked with clients can sort of understand that intuitively. I think that folks who haven't can read newspaper headlines about crime and think that granting clemency or considering people for second chances is inconsistent with addressing the crime problem, keeping our communities safe. And it just takes digging a little bit deeper and really understanding the human beings who are inside the criminal justice system to be able to see that clemency is not incompatible with public safety. It actually makes our communities safer. I would really encourage folks who haven't represented a client or been to a prison to do that, because it will change the way you think about individuals who are incarcerated in our country. And I just want to close by saying that Governor Ehrlich is absolutely right that criminal justice reform has sort of faded in popularity, but giving people the opportunity to earn a second chance, that is not purely a criminal justice reform issue, it's a civil rights issue. And I think it's one that, separate and apart from the debate about criminal justice reform, is really something that deserves close consideration.
Thank you. David?
So I think where we were, you know, in the moment it was sort of a purple issue, was that there was a recognition that the United States was out of whack in this regard, that we were an outlier globally in terms of the percentage of our population that's in prison, and we were an outlier historically with respect to norms in this country. And you know, that's one layer. And the other was when you looked at all of the sentences, life without parole, all of the inflexibilities that had been injected into the sentencing process, that a lot of injustice had resulted, and that we were wasting resources, and that we were wasting lives. And I really do think there was a recognition of that, and it's still true. So it's well known that I do not do politics. I'm not. There are others on the panel who are very skilled in it, and I confess I'm not. But I believe firmly that we continue to have, as a country, a gigantic policy problem that translates into human realities, and I think we just have to keep hammering that fact and try to insist that policy comes around to address what is a real national disgrace, I think, and travesty. So I hope that can be the case. It seems to me hammering the facts. Jason has marshaled them brilliantly, and I won't belabor them, but I think that has to be the answer. We have to keep hammering what's right and what's in our national interest and our community's interest, as Liz was saying. I do think, you know, having a process that has integrity and that has adequate resources and that has credibility has got to be the guts of the system we have now, and I think it's great that we've moved in that direction. I think that's good news. I don't dispute the proposition that clemency is an imperfect tool, but it is the tool we have, as many have said. So I hope that's where it can go. It seems to me it is the as you look at it, you look at the people involved, and you see the results of the clemency that's been extended. I think it's impossible not to realize that what's been done, to the extent it's been done, is good. It's helping our communities. It's helping make us a more just society. So I hope we can continue with it to you know, and resume it because it's critical. And if it can become a norm, you know, that's the other thing. It became a norm that there would not be clemency. You know, I was hoping that the Obama Clemency Initiative would kind of break that mold. I think we need to find our way to have it be a regular thing. I mean, I think what the governor was saying about do it every month, you know, you'd like that. Make it a norm. Make it some kind of a norm that becomes every day if you can. That would not be popular at the White House, I don't think, but I think it's a great idea. Anyway, that's all.
Thank you all. I want to turn it now to the audience. I already see hands up. I want to just welcome everyone to direct questions to specific panelists and to only ask questions. Comments can be reserved for afterward. Everyone's welcome to talk to the panelists directly afterward.
Sorry.
Does somebody, yeah, go for it.
Hi, Jason. So Jason mentioned Mark, and you know, one of the things that people have suggested over the last 10 years that could change clemency is the idea that clemency be moved out of the DOJ, both to create a political insulation that people might see it as a less political process, and also to remove the perception, at least, it sounds like you're trying to deal with some of that, that that it's the fox guarding the hen house. And I was wondering if you all thought what the potential you thought for that. It had a great deal of momentum in the last campaign, including being backed by President Biden, the vice president, a bunch of other people. The Biden-Sanders unity plan, it was in there, and it's just kind of gone by the wayside since then. And so I was just wondering what people's thoughts might be on that.
Can you direct your question to one person so we have room for others?
I guess Elizabeth, since she's the one that...
Thank you.
Sure, you're asking if I'd like to put myself out of a job. I think the clemency function can work well in multiple different locations. It's really just a question of ensuring that the office that reviews the applications, which right now is mine, is adequately resourced and has people who are thoughtful and compassionate and approaching their task without any political affiliation or bias in terms of one worldview or another. And I really believe that we've achieved that in the Office of the Pardon Attorney, and I think the process is working well where it is. I understand why people are skeptical of situating the clemency function within the Department of Justice, and I see the argument for putting it elsewhere, and I think it could work well outside of the Department of Justice too. But, working within the system we have, which is with the Office of the Pardon Attorney located in the Department of Justice, I actually think it's working very well.
Do we have someone on this side?
Hi, this question is for the former governor. So I noted during your remarks that you said getting buy-in from the victim community is extremely important when doing clemency. As we know, survivors of crime aren't a monolith. I know survivors who are everything from abolitionists to extreme hardliners. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering, one, what does buy-in from that community look like? And two, how do you navigate those differing perspectives?
I had an advantage. I was in the state legislature on the House Judiciary Committee for 8 years, and as a result, our jurisdiction included victims' rights. And in the 80s and 90s, which sounds like a long time ago to young people in this room, but it's really not. That was a thing, a big thing. I think less so today, unfortunately, but literally victims of crime, the major group, the umbrella group in Maryland would sit in to the extent they could on our voting sessions. So I got to know them. I got to know the leader with whom I agreed often, and sometimes disagreed in a very public way. So I think we had a good relationship, but when I left Congress to run for governor and decided to do this, I thought I needed to sit down with her and explain what we were doing and why we were doing it and how we were going to do it. And not necessarily to have her say I was better than sliced bread, but no surprises. The common theme, I think, from a lot of us here is no surprises. Because that's when you really get hurt, and that's when you really, if you talk about a movement and a different approach to these issues, surprises in the press, in the media, in that context, will kill you. So it wasn't approval, but it was information, it was give and take, it was, if you think I'm screwing up, go out there, I have no problem with it, but here's what we're doing and why, and I think it's part of the job description.
Hi. Ames Growett from the Brennan Center. I wanted to ask, I guess I hate, Elizabeth, I hate to bombard you with another question right after one other, but yesterday the FBI's crime data for 2022 came out showing a pretty sharp drop in murders year over year, 6.5% in the national murder rate, decline in violent crime as well. I was wondering how these crime trends that sort of look like the pandemic spike is receding might affect clemency efforts, hopefully favorably, and other work on second chances.
Glad you're not asking me to do math. The numbers at the beginning were a little alarming. So from the perspective of the review that the Office of the Pardon Attorney does, it really doesn't make any difference at all. We're not looking at those types of trends. We're looking at individual applications and deciding, making a recommendation based on the merits of the individual application. So we're looking at, is this particular individual in a position where they're ready to be safely released back into the community? And we conduct that analysis without really considering the types of data and trends that you're talking about.
We have a question right here in the front row. Oh, is there somebody else in the queue? It's hard to see. Go for it.
Apologies, my question is for Liz as well, but I've been fortunate enough to work with you through my organization, Last Prisoner Project, on these issues, and I am really grateful for you and your office's approach to this. We talked a lot in the last panel about the conventional purposes of incarceration as punishment, retribution, rehabilitation, public safety, but that of course ignores what Cynthia and Jason have spoken to, with racial animus being the purpose behind a lot of our laws and a lot of our sentencing practices, our drug laws being one such example of that. I'm wondering if you could speak to how your office is working to specifically address that as being a purpose to a lot of the lengthy sentences that you're reviewing.
And the question is, what are we doing to address the racial disparity piece? I'm not sure I understood the question.
And what specific disparities or laws that have led to, or sentencing guidelines that have led to some of these?
So we're looking very closely at an analysis of how sentencing would likely be different today. And one of the things that we do when we make a recommendation in a commutation case is we calculate what's the likely sentence that an individual would face today. And that takes into consideration changes in law, like the First Step Act, takes into consideration things like the Attorney General's charging memo on drug offenses, which expressly recognize the disparity that exists between punishments for crack and powder cocaine offenses. So we look at those laws, those sentencing laws that are sources of race-based disparity in the criminal justice system, and we apply them in the evaluation of the clemency applications. I will say that historically we have not tracked race data as part of our application. We don't collect data on the race of the applicant. But after consulting with the Department of Justice's Bureau of Justice Statistics, I was persuaded that it is best practices for us to start collecting that data so that we can explicitly see how clemency affects people along racial lines as well as other important demographic lines. So our new clemency application form, which should hopefully be launching in 2024, will collect that data so that we can do a better job of tracking the effect that clemency has on different demographic groups, including along racial lines, which is not something that's been done historically.
Elizabeth, can I just say that answer just made way too much sense. That you just answered the question. You answered the question. It makes sense, and it goes back to the point we made earlier. That's not that hard. It just made sense. Congratulations.
Thank
You
you.
could never make it in politics, ever.
That is very true.
I'd like to add one thing, since the last panel did talk about the purposes of incarceration. I'd just like to give you this nugget that during the Colson Task Force, when we were having hearings, we had the then head of the Bureau of Prisons testify. And I asked the question, how are we measuring the impact of imprisonment on people? And the answer was, we don't. So what are we doing? Right? Why are they there?
We only have time for one or two more questions.
Okay.
I see all the eager hands, so I encourage the conversation to continue after we wrap up, but I want to make sure each panelist is able to give a closing thought. So let's.
So Mark Osler, I'm the Deputy Hennepin County Attorney in Minnesota, and I'm going to skip over the assertion that everything's fine with the process right now, given that there's really no meaningful output coming out in terms of people getting commutations. And I'm going to direct my question to Jason. Jason, what you doing now, and do you need funding for it?
That's your cousin. That's your cousin right there.
What I'm doing now, I've been blessed, right? And just to kind of give a quick synopsis, I've in my community, I've been Volunteer of the Year 3 years. I was recently on Good Morning America. I was a hometown hero. I've helped 12 people get out of prison through clemency that were serving life without parole. Majority of them were women. And there was a store that I used to, when I started selling drugs from in 1992, when I was 15 years old. I used to sell marijuana from this street corner, and everybody did. It was kind of like our jumping off point. We didn't have boys clubs or girls clubs in our community, so we did what we saw. And I now, my nonprofit, we own that grocery store now, and and it's a nonprofit grocery store where it's located in a food desert, and we provide access to healthy and affordable options, eggs, dairy products, fruits and vegetables at cost. We make no money off that. We have an afternoon snack program at 3 o'clock where all kids get fruits, drinks, and healthy snacks. And we have an internship program where we teach the kids social skills, etiquette, financial management, and how to operate and manage a small business. It's basically what I would have needed in my community that would have kept me out of prison, that would have kept my brother alive. And not just me and my brother, but hundreds of us who went to prison. But I'm only able to, I tell you all that, but when I came out of prison, like, it was tough for me, right? Like, nobody wanted to hire me. Not because I sold drugs, but because I was in prison for 20 years. That was my crime. My crime wasn't what I did in my community, but because I had that paper, my first job, I had to take my executive order to get my first job. And then I got fired. I didn't get fired, but they couldn't hire me because I didn't have a driver's license. I didn't know how to drive a car. But I was able to do what I was able to do because people saw that the president believed in me. And if the president believed in me, then it knocked down those barriers and those walls. Because I had seen so many people come back to prison, and it would make me mad. Because I'd be like, man, just give me my chance. If I get out, I can make it. I can show them. Same thing. I came out. Then, can't hire you. People will be scared of you. But it's that paper, right? Can't everybody get a commutation and take an executive order to their employment interview? But what does that paper look like for people that are being released, that come out of prison every day? But that's what we got to figure out. What does that paper look like to help these individuals reintegrate back into society successfully?
Thank you for the questions. I think we heard many themes throughout today about how there are too many people incarcerated for too long. Are we going to 10 after? Or?
We can take a couple more minutes.
Yeah. There are too many people incarcerated for too long, that these back-end solutions are safe. They, in fact, make us safer, and that this political moment is making it harder to do this. So we really need to lean into the facts. I think we are at time. So with that, I want to thank our esteemed panelists for this lively discussion, and again, invite everyone to continue the conversation with them as you see them throughout the conference.
Thank you so much. This was great. Just for everyone's awareness, up next in just a couple minutes will be Chairman Reeves giving remarks for the United States Sentencing Commission. Thank you, everyone.